You could have been born anywhere, in a village with sheep, on the shore with fishermen, or even in a city with books and lace. But you're lucky you were born where the air is thick with coal dust and the sky is gray not from clouds but from factory smoke. You're a daughter of the industrial streets. You weren't promised a castle, but maybe you dreamed at least of a house where the ceiling doesn't drip. Husband's a hard worker, honest. A miner. Hands like sandpaper, eyes like coal. You could build a life with him, they said. In theory. In practice, you learn early on what it's like to wash clothes that never get clean, to feed your children bread and coal, and to wait for your husband from the darkness into which he goes every day. And most importantly, you learn what it's like to be a woman who has no time, no choice, no right to be weak. Just a line for a funeral. And here's the question. Will you have the strength to live such a life and not lose face behind the dust? Your childhood began in a worker's row, where the cry of a newborn was quieter than the clang of hammers striking iron. The walls were thin, the air was thick, and no one paused for joy. Around you, everything shook with labor. No one sang lullabies, only shift whistles. You started working before you even knew what play was. You scrubbed floors with raw hands, boiled porridge in soot-blackened pots, chased rats away from crust of bread. You watched over younger siblings while your mother lay on her side, the dull shape of exhaustion with a spine permanently bent by years of servitude. You didn't have toys. You had a scrap of cloth tied into a knot and a wooden spoon with the end worn smooth by other people's mouths. That was your doll. You whispered to it sometimes in the dark, but it never answered. It just lay there, like everything else in your life, mute and used. Snow on your street never stayed white. It turned black as it fell, poisoned by chimney smoke that poured day and night, even on Christmas. The sky was always gray. The air smelled like ash. You learned not to look up. The clouds never changed anyway. You didn't learn to read. There were no books, no time, no point. But you could tell the difference between coughs. A shallow one meant a chill. The deep ones, the ones that stuck to the ribs, they meant a coffin. You could count life in wheezes, and you did. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, you thought things might improve. Maybe you'd marry out of this strait. Maybe someone in the family would survive long enough to save a bit. Maybe winter would pass without death this time. Then your mother came home from her third brother's funeral, face blank, hands black with coal dust. She didn't cry. She just sat. That was the moment you realized hope doesn't leave all at once. It fades like warmth in a room with no fire. At 15, people started to notice you, not for your face, not for charm, but for your wrists. Solid, broad, capable wrists. The kind that could scrub a floor, carry water, hold a baby, and still twist dough before sunrise. They didn't see you. They saw a future worker in a smaller house. He was a miner. That meant security in the loosest possible sense. He had a job, a wage, and black crescents of coal under his nails that never washed out. He was nearly twice your age and already had the back of an old man. But no one asked if you minded. He could provide, they said. And that was that. The wedding happened in the backyard, between laundry lines and a broken fence. It lasted an hour, maybe less. Your dress was borrowed, too long in the sleeves, and yellowed with age. The ring was thinner than wire and duller than dishwater. 3 hours later, you was back underground. You moved into his house. The ceiling leaked directly into a pot you never emptied fast enough. Mice lived in the walls. The neighbors heard every word when he raised his voice, which was often, and every silence when you didn't respond, which was always. The first nights were quiet, cold, damp. You didn't talk much, just grunted, ate, slept. You shared a bed without touching. Romance didn't make it this far down the hill. You tried to imagine tenderness, once, but the thought felt like wearing silk in a coal cart absurd. You began to understand your new role quickly. You weren't a girl anymore. You were a function. Cook, clean, birth, repeat. Your name faded into tasks, your body into routine. No one cared how you felt, only how fast you worked and how quiet you kept. Every morning began with coal. It was in the bed, and the dishes, and the soup. It clung to the walls, your hair, your lungs. You breathed it in before you opened your eyes, and you coughed it out long after the fires went cold. Even silence tasted like soot. Your husband came home late, coated in dust like a second skin. He spoke in fragments, mostly about tools or tiredness. He ate with his head down, like food was fuel, not comfort. Then came the sleep, restless, noisy, or still as stone. You preferred the coughing. At least it meant he was alive. One child had already made it through. Another one pressed into your spine with every step. You didn't think of your belly as a promise or a joy. It was just one more weight to carry between the wash basin and the fire grate. You moved like someone on a schedule written by someone else. You scrubbed clothes in water so cold it made your bones ache. Your fingers split open, nails cracked and peeled. Still, the stains never truly left. No matter how many times you rinsed, the fabric always smelled of ash. The dirt was permanent. Like the life itself, the future was already drawn. Boys went to the pits. Girls went to the pots. You didn't say this out loud. You didn't need to. It was carved into the walls, the air, the way people looked at your children. When your daughter tried to pretend, you saw yourself. You said nothing. Sometimes you laughed. Not loud, never loud. Just at night, under your breath, when no one could hear. When something absurd crossed your mind, like leaving, for sleeping in. The sound came out rough, more like a wheeze than joy. But it was yours. And it was still breathing. One day you didn't come back from shift. No warning, no sound, no slow decline. Just gone. Another miner showed up instead, face blank like he'd been hollowed out. He said nothing at all, just stood there, helmet in hand. And you already knew. They gave you a black cloth and 3 shillings. Assistance, they called it. There was no body, no final touch, no moment to say goodbye. Just a coffin, nailed shut before you could see inside. Like even grief had a time limit. You didn't cry right away. There was dinner to make, a toddler to settle, laundry to fold before the frost set in. Morning had to get in line behind survival. Grief waited. It always waited. You became an expert at delaying it. Only at night, when everything was quiet and no one asked anything of you, you lay down on the floor. Not because you wanted to, but because your legs stopped working. You stared at the ceiling, not expecting comfort, just needing somewhere to place your eyes that didn't require strength. A week later, you started work. Coal sorting, a job not meant for women, until it had to be. Your hands bled the same way they always had, just faster now. The air was darker, the silence louder. No one asked if you were ready. They just pointed and said there. People told you, you're strong. They said it like praise, like a medal. But you knew better. You weren't strong. You were cornered. There's a difference. You didn't choose this. You just didn't have the luxury to collapse. You were 40, but you looked 60. Your hands trembled when they wrung out cloth. Your eyes blurred over soap and shadow. You still scrubbed floors in the same house, on the same knees, like time hadn't moved, but your body had. The cracks in the wood were older friends than most people you knew. The children were gone. One to the war, one to the grave. The others scattered like cold dust, drifting towards cities or factories or names you no longer heard. One of them sent letters, sometimes. You kept them folded in the drawer with the thread and the quiet. You still wore the bandana. Habit more than purpose now. There wasn't much hair left to protect, and the coal didn't just settle in your scalp anymore. It had made a home in your bones. You coughed harder in the mornings, but made less sound. Even your lungs were tired of trying. Sometimes you remembered how, long ago, you said you wanted to see the sea. Salt, breeze, water as far as the eye could stretch. Now the closest thing was the wash basin. When the water stayed warm without being boiled, you called that a good day. Close enough. You died in a chair by the window, a cloth in your lap, one hand curled around it like there was still work to do. The grandchildren called you the old one who always coughed. They didn't know your name, only your sound. You didn't correct them. You were too tired by then. Still you lived. Not out of hope or will. Just because rest was never an option. You kept going in the same way the rain kept falling, out of rhythm, without asking permission, until one day it stopped. Maybe the worst part was that you made it. You endured. You completed the whole brutal thing. And no one noticed. No songs. No stories. Just another name carved into soot. And maybe that, in the end, was all survival ever meant. Over the course of your life, you gave birth to 5 children, buried 3, froze your hands twice, nearly lost your home 4 times, and never once. Your neighbors' respect. You cooked roughly 11,000 servings of porridge, scrubbed about 3 tons of coal dust, with no visible result, and once caught a rat with your bare hands. But no one remembers that part. You never made it to the sea. But one day, you saw a puddle with the sky reflected in it. Close enough. You didn't become a legend. You didn't make it into any books. But the numbers speak for themselves. You outlived what the system had planned for you. And if you had the chance to leave a bit of advice behind, it would probably go something like this. Don't marry someone who's silent, even in his sleep. Never trust coal. It hides everywhere. And if one day your grandson says he's tired, hand him the laundry basin. Let him start small.